They look you in the eyes and swear it was a mistake. They hold your hand while their mind wanders somewhere else. They say they love you, and maybe they do, but they betray you anyway. So how is that possible? Cheating isn't just about sleeping with someone else. It's about deception, control, cowardice, but also, much more deeply, it's about fear. The fear of being seen, the fear of being known, the fear of having to become a whole person without escape hatches or backup fantasies. This isn't a video about relationships. This is about the shadow of the human mind, the part that smiles with you while plotting something else, the side of someone's personality that doesn't want connection, it wants dominance, not vulnerability, but validation. You may think you understand what betrayal is, but most people get it wrong. They think it's a moment, a kiss, a night, a message. But betrayal isn't a moment. It's a pattern. It starts slowly, with half-truths, with quiet resentments, with subtle comparisons and fantasies no one talks about. Until suddenly one day, the person lying next to you becomes a stranger. Not because they changed overnight, but because you finally saw them clearly for who they were all along. In this video, we'll take you deep into the psychology of a cheater. Not the gossip, not the scandal, not the blame game, but the mental world of someone who betrays. What they think, how they justify, why they crumble, and how, sometimes, they never even realize the damage they've done until it's far too late. Let's begin. The truth is, most cheaters aren't monsters. They're not plotting their betrayals like villains in a movie. In fact, many of them don't even fully understand why they're doing it. And that's what makes them so dangerous. See, every person carries within them multiple versions of themselves. There's the self they show to the world, the self they show to their partner, and the self they don't even admit exists. Psychologists refer to this as the divided self, when someone hasn't integrated their internal contradictions, when they haven't faced their traumas, insecurities, or suppressed desires. They live a double life inside their own mind. A cheater doesn't cheat because they're inherently evil. They cheat because they are psychologically fragmented. They don't have a consistent narrative of who they are. And when that internal identity is unstable, so are their relationships. One moment they believe they're a committed, loving partner. The next they become a stranger to themselves, impulsive, reckless, driven by shadows they don't even recognize. This is often rooted in unresolved childhood dynamics. People who grow up needing to perform for love, who had to be good to be accepted, often develop an outer self that looks stable, kind, and dependable. But behind that, there's a raging, unmet desire for freedom, chaos, escape. They don't consciously want to hurt anyone, but they unconsciously seek out situations where they can feel something they've been starved of: power, excitement, risk, attention without intimacy. The problem is this: they rarely understand these needs until it's too late. So when they cheat, it feels like a release. But what they're releasing is not love. It's the pressure of pretending to be someone they're not. Let's take an example from clinical psychology. Dr. Esther Perel, renowned relationship therapist, says this: when we seek the gaze of another, it isn't always our partner we are turning away from, but the person we have become. This is the core truth. Many cheaters aren't running from their relationship. They're running from the version of themselves that relationship reflects. It's not about you. It's about how they see themselves when they're with you. Stable, boring, trapped, too vulnerable. So they look for a mirror that reflects something different. Someone who sees them as sexy, desirable, rebellious, powerful. But this search is never ending because no matter how many mirrors they look into, the truth remains. They don't know who they are. And when you don't know who you are, loyalty becomes impossible because loyalty requires a stable self, and cheaters live in fragments. One moment, they mean it when they say they love you. The next, they're acting on impulses they don't fully understand. And then they cry and apologize and beg, not because they're manipulative, though sometimes they are, but because they're terrified of being exposed for not being the person they claim to be. In psychoanalytic theory, this is called narcissistic wounding. The cheater doesn't just feel guilt after being caught. They feel shame. And shame is far more dangerous because guilt can lead to growth. Shame leads to self-protection, denial, and more lies. The person they betrayed becomes not just a victim, but a threat to their self-image. So what do? They attack, they flip the script, they blame, they try to paint themselves as misunderstood, as lost, as someone who never meant to hurt you. But that's the tragedy. They didn't mean to, because they never even knew what they were doing. They were acting from the part of themselves they refused to face. And until they confront that hidden self, they'll betray again. Not necessarily with another body, but with silence, distance, manipulation, or abandonment. Cheating is just one form of betrayal, but all betrayal begins the same way, with a person who doesn't know who they really are and who's too afraid to find out. To understand betrayal, we must understand the human need for power, not power in the political sense, but power over one's environment, over how others see you, over your own sense of identity and importance. Let's be brutally honest. Most betrayal is not about sex, it's about control. Control over how you feel. Control over how someone else sees you. Control over the version of yourself that you're too scared to admit is insecure, afraid, or inadequate. Cheaters don't just cheat to feel loved. They cheat to feel powerful, to prove to themselves that they still matter, that they can bend reality to their desires, that they're not as small or insignificant as they secretly fear. This is why so many acts of betrayal happen not during times of chaos, but during moments of stability. The relationship seems fine, the partner is loyal, things are calm, but for someone who ties their self-worth to external validation, calm feels like a coffin. They panic. They ask themselves, is this all I am now? Just one half of a stable couple? Just someone's partner, someone's fiance, someone's parent? So they seek out rebellion, not against their partner, but against the version of themselves that feels trapped in ordinary life. This is where ego and insecurity fuse together, a deadly combination. Because when a person's ego is large, but their sense of self is fragile, they begin to demand admiration from others like it's oxygen. The attention of one person is never enough, not because the partner isn't worthy, but because the cheater's need to be admired is insatiable. And here's the twist. They don't admire themselves, so they need someone else to do it for them, over and over again. This is called narcissistic supply, and many people, without even realizing it, turn their relationships into an addiction, not to love, but to validation, the compliments, the flirting, the thrill of being desired. It's a performance. And like any performer, they need an audience. One admirer isn't enough. They crave the rush of being someone's fantasy, not someone's responsibility. And this is why betrayal often begins emotionally. A late-night text, an innocent flirtation, a moment of feeling seen. It's not about the person they cheat with. It's about the feeling they chase, the feeling of being in control, of being wanted, of rewriting their identity, if only for a moment. This is often magnified in men and women who grew up feeling powerless. The child who was bullied, the teenager who was overlooked, the young adult who never felt enough. They carry those scars into adulthood, but instead of healing them, they hide them under confidence. They wear ambition like armor, charm like a mask, and when they cheat, they tell themselves, I deserve this. I've earned this. I still got it. But all of it is a distraction, a temporary fix, because deep down, they're not proving anything to the world. They're trying to prove something to themselves. Let's take a moment and reflect on the teachings of Robert Greene, author of the 48 Laws of Power. In his work, Greene describes how power is rarely taken, it's seduced, and that the need to be in control is often born from a place of fear, not strength. Cheaters are often the most fragile people in the room, but they cover it with status, with good looks, with charisma, with the illusion that they're untouchable. But what happens when they lose control? When they get caught? When the fantasy collapses? They don't respond with clarity. They respond with confusion, rage, or victimhood. They say things like, I didn't mean for this to happen. It just happened. I was feeling lost. But the truth is, it didn't just happen. It was the inevitable result of a mind addicted to control, but unable to control itself. This is the paradox of betrayal. It is done by people who crave power, but have none over their own impulses. And the scariest part? They often think they're good people, because in their minds they compartmentalize. They say that wasn't the real me, that was a moment of weakness. Or worse, it didn't count because I still love them. But love without discipline is chaos. Affection without honesty is poison. Cheaters think they are in control, but the truth is they are being controlled by their wounds, by their ego, by their fear of being ordinary. They seek to be adored but not known. They want to be praised but not questioned. They crave the thrill of attention but reject the vulnerability of accountability. And this is why so many betrayers never truly change, because they don't want to face the root of their behavior. They want to move past it quickly, apologize, move on, pretend it wasn't that bad. But betrayal is not a small thing. It is a spiritual earthquake. It reveals not just who they are, but what they value. And in that moment, it becomes clear. Some people would rather feel powerful than be loyal. They'd rather be adored by a stranger than build something sacred with someone they love. Because real love requires surrender. And for the insecure ego, surrender feels like death. That's why they betray, to feel alive, even if it kills the one who trusted them. You may think betrayal is a conscious, malicious choice, and sometimes it is. But far more often, betrayal hides beneath layers of self-deception. A cheater doesn't always see themselves as a cheater. They see themselves as someone who's just trying to be happy, someone who's misunderstood, someone whose needs weren't being met. This is what makes betrayal so terrifying, because it's not just done with lies to others. It's done with lies to the self. At the heart of this mental trickery is something called cognitive dissonance. It's what happens when a person's actions don't align with their values, and the tension that creates is unbearable. So the mind takes a shortcut. Instead of changing the behavior, it changes the belief. It invents justifications, excuses, and mental stories that make betrayal seem reasonable. The cheater tells themselves, my partner stopped understanding me. We were drifting apart anyway. I didn't feel appreciated. It was just a moment of weakness. But these aren't reasons. They're narratives, crafted after the betrayal to make it more palatable. Psychologist Leon Festinger studied this in depth. He found that when people face a contradiction between who they think they are and what they've done, they don't usually change their actions. They change their story. This is why cheaters often become defensive, even angry when confronted. They're not just protecting the lie, they're protecting the illusion of who they are. Because admitting the full truth would mean confronting the most terrifying realization of all. I am not who I thought I was. I am capable of hurting someone I love. I chose ego over integrity. And for many, that's unbearable. So they twist the story. They cast themselves as the victim. They blame the relationship, the timing, the stress. But at its core, it's not about external circumstances. It's about internal collapse, the collapse of honesty, the collapse of responsibility, the collapse of a self-image they desperately want to preserve. In clinical settings, this is sometimes linked to moral disengagement, a term coined by psychologist Albert Bandura. It describes the process by which people mentally detach from the consequences of their actions, so they can continue doing what they know is wrong without feeling guilt. This is how someone can say, "I still love you," after betraying you, because in their mind, they've separated the betrayal from the love. They've created two stories, one where they care for you and another where their actions don't count. It's delusional, but it's also common. And the most dangerous part? These justifications start long before the act itself. They begin with silent resentment, with entitlement, with tiny, unchecked fantasies that slowly become permissions. The cheater might start thinking, I do everything in this relationship. I never get what I need. I'm not appreciated. And then one day, when an opportunity comes, those thoughts become fuel. They don't stop to ask, is this right? They ask, don't I deserve this? This is why so many cheaters say, I didn't plan it. It just happened. Because by the time it happens, the justification was already built, brick by brick, rationalization by rationalization. And if you listen closely to their words after the betrayal, you'll often hear the same theme. They don't regret the act. They regret the consequences. They regret getting caught. They regret the pain. But very rarely do they sit in the discomfort long enough to unravel the story they told themselves. Because doing that would require something few people have: the courage to admit they were wrong without qualification. Not I was wrong, but not I made a mistake because, just I was wrong. I chose myself at your expense. So most people run. They try to start over. They find someone new, someone who doesn't know what they did. And they convince themselves they've changed when really they've just escaped. But escape is not redemption. Rewriting the past is not healing. And the worst betrayal is often not to another person, but to one's own potential for growth. Let's pause here and reflect on Machiavelli, the master of cold strategy. In The Prince, he famously says, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." And while that applies to rulers, many people internalize a similar belief in relationships. So the question isn't just, why did they cheat? The real question is, what lie did they tell themselves to make it feel okay? And until that lie is dismantled, they are doomed to repeat it, because betrayal is never just an action. It is a philosophy, a quiet belief that their pain matters more than your trust. After the dust settles, after the text messages are exposed, after the tears and rage and empty apologies, you're left with one haunting question. Was any of it real? The love, the shared memories, the late night talks, the way they held you when you were scared. And the most painful part is this: sometimes it was real. That's what makes betrayal so devastating. It splits your reality in half. Because both things can be true. They loved you, and they betrayed you. How do you live with that? To understand the aftermath of betrayal, we must face a truth most people avoid. Humans are capable of holding contradictions. We can care and destroy. We can be honest in one moment and deceptive in the next. We can feel guilt and still repeat the crime. This is the shadow side of human nature, the part no one wants to talk about, the part that can smile and lie in the same breath. In psychology, there's a term for how people manage these contradictions. It's called compartmentalization. It's when the mind isolates conflicting emotions so they don't interfere with each other. This is how someone can say, I love you, while hiding a secret life. Because in their mind, those two realities never meet. One is love, one is escape, one is you, one is their unspoken hunger. But here's the thing, this division isn't strength, it's weakness. It's the failure to live with emotional integrity. It's the refusal to hold all parts of the self accountable to one another. And when the betrayal finally surfaces, when the walls collapse, what you're really witnessing is not just dishonesty, it's the collapse of a false identity. The cheater becomes exposed not only to you, but to themselves. They can no longer pretend they're the person they imagined. And in that moment, they either evolve or they run. And here's the tragic part. Most run because growth hurts. It requires looking in the mirror and seeing the part of yourself that betrayed someone who trusted you. And very few have the courage to stand in that fire. Instead, they rewrite the story. They minimize, they project. They look for new people to validate the version of themselves they wish were true. But you're left with the crater, the silence, the sleepless nights, the disorientation. This is where many victims of betrayal fall into the trap of self-blame. Was I not enough? Did I push them away? Was it something I did? But betrayal is not about you. It's about their relationship with themselves, with their own emptiness, with the parts of them they never had the courage to face. And so they used you, not consciously, but emotionally. They used your love as a mask for their pain, your trust as a shield for their cowardice. They didn't cheat on you. They cheated through you, because you were the mirror, and the clearer your love became, the more they had to look away. It's often said that betrayal teaches you who someone really is. That's only half true. Betrayal also teaches you who you are, how you respond, how you rise, how you rebuild your sense of self when someone you trusted burned it down. But make no mistake, there is a brutal gift in betrayal, a kind of awakening, because once you've seen someone lie to your face while holding your hand, once you've been shattered by someone who once swore they'd protect your heart, you learn one of life's most important lessons. You can survive the loss of a person, but you must never lose yourself again. This moment, this devastation, can become your teacher. You learn to trust your intuition, to question charm, to recognize the subtle signs of self-division in others, to stop mistaking passion for integrity, because people don't betray you suddenly. They betray you in pieces, with tiny cracks in consistency, with moments of silence that should have been accountability, with shifts in energy that you felt but ignored. And yet, that's not your shame to carry. It never was. The betrayer may never understand the full impact of what they've done. They may move on, distracted and unhealed, but they will live with the truth they tried to bury, that at a pivotal moment they chose the path of cowardice. Let's end this with a historical lens. Think of Brutus and Julius Caesar. Brutus wasn't just any conspirator, he was a friend. a confidant, a man Caesar trusted. And yet, with a single act, Brutus became the symbol of ultimate betrayal. Why? Because betrayal hurts most when it comes from someone you allowed close enough to matter. The knife wounds heal, but the collapse of reality, that takes years. Betrayal reveals character, not just theirs, but yours. You don't have to forgive them, but you must release the illusion that it was your fault. You don't have to trust again quickly, but you must trust yourself again eventually, because betrayal doesn't get to define you unless you let it. So what do you do now? After the silence, after the screaming, after the apologies that came too late or never came at all, what do you do when someone betrays you so deeply that you begin to doubt not just them, but yourself? Here's the first truth. You are not broken. You were lied to, but you are not the lie. You were deceived, but you are not the one who needs fixing. Betrayal has a way of distorting your vision. It makes you question your worth. It makes you replay every moment, looking for clues. It makes you wonder if you should have seen it sooner, acted faster, been better. But let me tell you, cheating is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their capacity to love, to be honest, to face their own darkness. And not everyone has that capacity. Not everyone is brave enough to sit in discomfort instead of fleeing into fantasy. Not everyone knows how to hold another person's heart without crushing it. You do. You stayed. You trusted. You opened up. That's not weakness. That's courage. So stop asking, why wasn't I enough? Start asking, why did they need someone so good to hide behind? Because that's what you were. A shield, a mirror, a moment of safety for someone who didn't yet know how to feel safe with themselves. And now you face a choice: to stay stuck in the pain, or to rise from it, not by forgetting, but by understanding. Understand this: cheaters betray not because you lack something, but because they lack something inside themselves. They cheat because they can't sit with their own inadequacy, because they need to feel wanted by many to silence the voice that says they're not enough for one. They ran from truth. You didn't. That makes you stronger than you think. But here's what betrayal also teaches us about life itself. No one is immune to pain. No relationship is risk-free. No love comes with a guarantee. But this pain, it sharpens you. It teaches you what to look for, not in others, but in yourself. It teaches you how to spot the person who values connection over conquest, depth over distraction, intimacy over admiration. And one day you'll meet someone like that, and you'll feel the difference. Because they won't just say the right things. They'll do the right things. They won't need you to complete them. They'll already be whole. But until then, this is your task. Become that person for yourself. Don't rush to fill the void. Don't numb it with noise. Sit with it. Feel the ache. Let it reshape your standards. Let it clarify your boundaries. Let it remind you of the kind of love that isn't built on performance, but presence. Remember this: the person who betrayed you has to live with themselves every day. They have to carry the knowledge that they hurt someone who trusted them. They can bury it, deny it, justify it, but deep down they know. You don't have to carry their burden. You only have to carry your truth. And your truth is, you are still worthy, still whole, still capable of extraordinary love. So breathe. The worst has already happened. Now it's time to begin again, not by trusting others, but by trusting yourself. Because the next time someone tries to feed you lies dressed as affection, you'll see it. You'll feel it. You'll walk away with grace, not because you're scared to love again, but because you've learned what love isn't. And that knowledge, That's the beginning of real power. Thank you for watching. If this spoke to something deep inside you, consider sharing this video with someone who needs it, someone questioning their worth, someone trying to understand what happened to them. And if you've ever been betrayed by a partner, a friend, or even by yourself, you are not alone.